Mic on? Oh, John.
Right. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the City of Lauderdale-By-The-Sea and the Broward County League of Women Voters, I welcome you to tonight's candidate forum. I'm Joanne A. I'm co-president of the Broward League. As you know, the League is nonpartisan. We don't support or oppose any candidate for any office or political party. This event is for you to learn about the candidates and the positions that they hold on certain issues. I ask you to please silence your phones and remind you that tonight's events cannot be used for political ads. The candidates this evening, two for mayor, former Commissioner Mark Brown, which I believe is to my far right, and to my immediate right, Mr. Chris Vincent, Commissioner Vincent. Over here to my left, we have Alan Bluestein, doesn't matter. And to his left, Commissioner Elliot Sokolow. We selected people in alphabetical order. I kind of rearranged the signs after I walked in, sorry, for opening statements. So we're going to have 90 seconds of an opening statement, first on the mayoral position and then on the commissioner's position. This closing statement will be 60 seconds and will be done in reverse order. Our timekeeper tonight is a very close friend of mine from the League of Women Voters in Maryland. Her name is Linda Reed, and she will ensure that you have the opportunity to address all the questions. Your questions were submitted via email directly to the League, just so you know. I received 57. Yeah. If you have any additional ones, please bring your cards up front. I already have 6 of them, so it sounds like there's a high interest here tonight. So the last thing I want to mention to you is this whole forum is being telecast on Comcast Channel 78, UVerse Channel 99, will be rebroadcast at a later date, and will also be available on your website. So let us begin. We'll open with the 90-second open from Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Let's begin tonight by talking about our records. During my 6 years on the Town Commission, my principal area of responsibility was the environment. I led the successful effort in 2013 to secure a multi-million-dollar sand replenishment project to rebuild our beach after it was devastated by a hurricane at no cost to the town. Commissioner Vincent voted against putting the free sand on the beach. In 2015, I won approval of a second sand replenishment project to widen the beach. Commissioner Vincent voted against putting the new sand on the beach. I've organized more than 35 volunteer events to plant sea oats on the beach, to build up the sand dunes and protect property. I've also helped lead the fight against oil drilling and fracking in the Everglades. Now let's look at Commissioner Vincent's record. He has been in charge of infrastructure improvements for the past 8 years. During that time, he's done nothing to address the ugly, rat-infested, derelict Holiday Inn building which frames the south entrance to our town. He's done nothing to fix the sidewalks or improve the lighting or drainage along Elmar Drive. He's done nothing to improve the street lighting in Bel Air and Silver Shores. He's done nothing to improve the drainage or fix the bridge on Terramar Island. I've delivered on my responsibilities as the commissioner in charge of the environment. Commissioner Vincent has failed to deliver as the commissioner in charge of infrastructure, and I believe he will fail to deliver as mayor. Thank you.
Okay, next, Mr. Vincent.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, everyone here in Jarvis Hall and watching TV for caring enough to learn about your candidates. My name is Chris Vincent, your current commissioner and candidate for mayor in an upcoming election this March 13th. My wife Christine and I have lived in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea for the past 16 years with our daughter Paige, who is 17 now and off to college this fall. Oh, how time flies. We choose to live in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea and raise our daughter here, just like Christine's family did 43 years ago. This election is about honor, commitment, and trust. This election is about you, the voters. This election is about, and I believe about honoring the commitment and trust that you gave me 8 years ago, and I did just that. There's a clear distinction between me and my opponent and why I'm running for mayor. You will learn more about me this evening. My opponent quit his seat 2 years early to run for mayor. I completed my 2-term obligation given to me by you, the voters. Honesty and transparency is a big part of being an elected official. And when we get elected in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, we sign a code of conduct when taking office, and I take that very seriously. It's our way to assure each one of us keep a clear, focused vision on why we were elected and the expectation of completing our full terms. I did just that. My heart is in the right place, and as your next mayor, I would be proud to continue serving the community for all the right reasons. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the candidates for commissioner. Mr. Bluestein.
Absolutely. My name's Alan. Can you hear me? My name's Alan Bluestein. I'm not really. No? How about now? Okay. My name's Alan Bluestein. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri. I don't really have a record to run on because I'm new to the area. However, when I was in Plantation, I served as a commissioner for the Plantation Athletic League that ran about 6,000 children program. I moved here 2.5 years ago with my wife Stacy, who is treasurer of Terramar Association, and I had asked a neighbor of mine, because I've always been involved in my community one way or another, I'd asked my neighbor how I could get involved in the town. And he recommended that maybe I run for a seat. And then we had a picnic in Terramar, and the mayor also suggested that it might not be a bad idea to get involved. I work for Merrill Lynch, so I work with numbers. Finance is my background. I've been doing that for 20 years. I think I have a lot to offer the community. I'm very enthusiastic about the town. I walked last weekend and this weekend meeting people, and I will tell you that the people here love this town. They're the nicest people I think I've ever met. Nobody was disturbed me knocking their door. It's a great place to live, and I want to make it better. And that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Sokolov.
Thank you for coming or for watching us on television this evening. It's been my privilege to serve as a member of your town commission for the last 4 years. I'm seeking re-election to another 4-year term. I bring a wealth of experience to the town commission. Prior to moving here 7 years ago, my wife Enid and I lived in Sea Ranch Lakes for 15 years. So we've been neighbors for 22 altogether. I served on Sea Ranch Lakes Village Council for 11 years, including 6 as mayor and 7 as finance director. I've served on several county boards, including 12 years on the Board of Rules and Appeals and 6 years on the County Planning Commission. I've been on the board of directors of the Broward League of Cities for a total of 12 years and was on the Hillsborough Inlet Commission for 7 years. I served as national president of the Air Conditioning Contractors of America for 2 years. During my 4 years on the commission, I've argued and voted in favor of lowering town property tax rates and keeping expenses under tight control while continuing to provide the best municipal services. There are challenging projects coming over the next few years, including the Elmar Drive Greenway, redevelopment of the town hall complex, and traffic and parking. We've all seen and benefited from the improvements to the downtown over the last 6 years. Those improvements can and should continue, but the town must remain debt-free. My candidacy has been endorsed by Mayor Scott Sasser as well as former Mayor Roseanne Madej. I believe that experience counts. I have that experience.
Thank you. Okay, we'll begin with priorities. What are your top 2 priorities as, why don't we start on this side, the commissioner, Mr. Sokolov?
Top two priorities are getting the Elmar Drive project done and getting started on the redevelopment or not redevelopment or modernization of this facility. I'm not sure that anyone in this town would be willing to spend 25 or 30 or $35 million to rebuild town hall complex to come up with a huge edifice like has been done in Pompano in the last few years. This facility serves us nicely. It needs some improvement, but it doesn't need to be raised and rebuilt, causing debt to the town. So that's priority number 2. Priority number 1 is getting the Elmar Drive project, which seems to be a little behind schedule, moving. Thank you.
Mr. Bluestein?
Okay, I found that to be an interesting question because as I was walking in the south and meeting my neighbors in the north, depending where you live, you have a different perspective of what the problems are. So if you live off the trade winds, the marina is a big issue of what's going on there or not what's not going on as far as the cleanliness of the marina. The second would be the Covington Drive. I met people on there and they don't like the big Holiday Inn that they have, eyesore that they have to see every day. My deal is the traffic is just absolutely getting horrible, more horrible. But so what I'm saying is, depending on where you live, is what the issue or what the major issues is for the town.
Beginning with you, Mr. Vincent.
Thank you, ma'am. Parking and traffic to be addressed as one. As we move forward with capital improvement projects in our town, it's important to recognize the ever-increasing traffic flow and the parking demands. We should continue our parking studies. We should evaluate the findings. And in the past, land acquisitions and partnerships have worked very well and have proven to be both beneficial and profitable, and has been a component to the economic growth here in our town and our businesses. Any garage in this should go to a referendum, in my belief, and it should go to the voters of the people. As far as infrastructure, drainage, roads, and sewers, these are always important issues in any town or city. I've always been diligent and fiscally responsible in the repairing, replacing, and maintaining these matters for the past 8 years. But there's still work to be done. We have swale restoration, street lighting, and sidewalk issues that need to be addressed. I believe that these are important concerns in keeping the character of our town and our home values up. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you. My number 1 priority as mayor will be to complete the Elmar Drive Greenway project. When I served as the town's representative to the County Transportation Board, I secured a $2 million federal funding commitment to make major improvements along Elmar, including new sidewalks, drainage, lighting, and landscaping. This project is right on schedule. The design contract was awarded last August to a prestigious engineering firm, and I expect them to unveil their first artist renderings in the next few weeks. That will be followed by a series of public hearings. I'm really excited about this project, and I want to bring it to construction as soon as town residents have signed off on the design. My second priority will be to install security cameras around the public parking lots and residential streets in town. I requested these cameras last year after we had several incidents of gangs breaking into cars. I want to get this program going as quickly as possible to enhance public safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to begin with you, Mr. Bluestein. The question is, since you're relatively new, how often have you attended town meetings or have you watched the town meetings? How have you served this town most recently?
Okay, I started attending the town meetings in October. I'm sorry. I attended the town meetings starting in October, and then I went to the TV and started doing the back meetings over the last 6 months beforehand. And I haven't really given to the community at this time, and that's why I'm running.
Okay. How about your attendance record at the commission? I know you're on it, right?
Yes.
So,
And the question,
you're not new,
and the question will be then?
have you attended all the meetings?
I believe I may have been absent in the last 8 years. I would think I could count on 2 to 3 fingers of my absenteeism here on the commission. I take this very serious. I make sure I come to these meetings prepared. And the only time I think I've stayed away is if I was ill and I wouldn't want to come to the day as having any type of cold and possibly done it. But I've been 100% diligent with my privilege to be sitting up here for the town.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. I started attending the town commission meetings in 2007 when I started a newspaper here in town to try to bring it to public attention exactly what this commission and this town administration were doing. And I attended every town meeting from 2007 through 2012. When I folded my newspaper to run for office, I was elected and I attended, I think I only ever missed one meeting in 6 years on the town commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sokolow?
I've been a commissioner for 4 years now. Well, it'll be 4 years in a couple of weeks. And I believe that I've missed 2 meetings. Both of them were because I was on a vacation trip that did not get back until the day after the meeting. Other than that, I have always been here. And I've spent a lot of time at other meetings. I've been at every workshop, and I observed all of the meetings on television before I ran, after I moved to from Sea Ranch to Lauderdale-By-The-Sea in 2011.
Great, thank you. Mr. Vincent, I'm sure you're very familiar with the current budget and the millage rate. Do you see any changes?
Our budget and our millages have been pretty consistent for the last 8 years since I've been up here. Fortunately, we have not had to raise your taxes the last 8 years. We've been very diligent in completing our capital improvement projects without having to borrow money or raise your millage. And the budget's been fine. We have a great staff. We have a great finance director that came into town after I was elected back in 2010. We've done some good cleanup in how we do our budgeting, in how we track our budgeting, in how we commingle our funds in different areas and light items according to the gap. And I'm very satisfied with how the town's financial status is. We haven't had any major issues, fortunately. We have great reserves, and we attack and we spearhead these every year. And I'm very comfortable with the status of the town.
So the millage rate?
Millage rate great at 3.5896, I believe. We're still the 3rd lowest millage rate in the county, and we can all be proud of that.
Great. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. I've been out knocking on doors for the last couple of weeks, and this question comes up quite often. I find that not one person has said to me, my taxes are too high, or lower the taxes anymore. What I hear from people is, we have needs, infrastructure needs in this town that are not being met. Well, we can't meet the infrastructure needs if we starve the budget of the town. So we have got to strike the right balance in this town. I have no problem with what we've done the last 5 years with very small decreases in the millage rate. But at some point, we're going to have to realize that we're not going to get road projects in the town, and we're not going to get traffic calming projects in the town and other infrastructure improvements in the town if we don't have money, because I don't want to borrow money and take the town into debt either. So I would just say to everybody out there, especially the people I've been talking to, if you have needs in this town, you have to let us know and let us make the tough votes on whether we want to pay for them or we want to continue to lower the taxes. Thank you.
Mr. Sokolow?
As I said in my opening, and you will hear this from me over and over again, I've been on the commission for 4 years. When I got on the commission, the millage rate was approximately 3.9. It has decreased slightly every year to where it is now 3.586 or 589, I can't remember exactly. Taxes have gone up slightly in that time because property values, believe it or not, have come back up after they dropped significantly. But the state, when I was finance director in Sea Ranch, I became very familiar with state rules, and the state rules on cities and towns and counties are that they want you to have a 15% of your general operating fund in reserve each year, and this town has more like 25%. So there is significant room, and even after a hurricane, there's significant room to save money. Thank you.
Mr. Bluestein.
Okay, the exact millage rate is 3.5989, which came down from 3.6873, a savings of 0.0884. For my house, it was $40. And I think that to lower that for that amount in this town, maybe I'm stabbing myself, but I don't think I would have done it. I think a couple $100,000 for the town budget is a lot better than saving $30 or $40.
Thank you. So it sounds to me like all four of you would keep the millage rate, is that correct? Let's start, Mr. Brown, is that right? Just yes,
Well,
yes or no?
I
on
would
the
need to
millage
hear
rate?
some assurances from the town manager. If we take it down another 1/10 of a mil, and the town manager says we can absorb that loss, then I'd be willing to support it. But we have needs in this town, and my vote is going to go to fix the problems in this town, and not to just lower taxes for the sake of lowering taxes. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sokolow, is it your position to maintain the millage rate?
It is my position to maintain the millage rate as low as we can maintain it, and to reduce it if possible, as long as we have enough money in reserve to fund capital improvement projects without borrowing.
Sorry. Mr. Bluestein?
That's a loaded question, because if they're going to make or want to improve our facilities here, oh, I'm sorry, how about now? Okay, it's a little bit of a loaded question, because eventually they're going to need money to rebuild this eventually. We don't know when. So to keep bringing the taxes down, I mean, I don't think it's going to be significant. I wouldn't be in favor of reducing taxes, especially when we're going to have improvements that are going to need to be done.
Okay. Mr. Vincent, your position on the millage?
Yeah. Thank you. I'll address the millage in a second. What I'd like to say is we just recently completed a workshop and various town hall meetings to address the opportunity of a new town hall. In a nutshell, it was determined that building a new town hall was not a top priority. It's not economically feasible at this time or any time in the near future. You're looking at a cost of $25 to $35 million. The alternatives to work and maintain the facilities that we have now will suffice. And that's what the town wants, that small town quaint charm that we have and we will always have as long as I'm up here. As far as lowering the millage, every year expenditures change. You never know what's going to incur, and sometimes you have to adjust your budget for that. Most of the time we can be creative and move funds from this point to that point where we don't need it and where we do need it. And by doing that, we can be able to keep the same budget, the same millage. I'm sorry, not the same budget, but the same millage. It's creative financing, and that should be done when you're dealing with the taxpayers' money. There should never ever be a need to increase for the sake of increasing for that Sunday afternoon, little ride. If that's what the town residents want, I urge them to come to the meetings and speak on that and tell us what you want. We haven't heard anybody screaming to come up here either raise or lower, just keep the status quo, which we've done for the past 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you. The reason I asked the follow-up question is I'm sure all of you up here at the dais are aware of a ballot issue that's coming up in November that was set up by the state legislature. And what it is to raise the homestead exemption for properties of value of greater than $100,000. This is going to have a direct impact on every city in the state of Florida. The League, as the League of Women Voters, works with an organization called Defend Local, which pretty much wants the state to stay out of the affairs of local municipalities. I don't know of a single election where the people said, turn something down like that. So based on that, and based on the fact that it's coming in November, and you just all talked about the millage rate, what are you going to do? Because it's probably going to pass. Mr. Sokolow?
Well, I've asked the finance director of the town, who is our deputy mayor, to assess what the effect on Lauderdale-by-the-Sea will be. If you assume that our millage is roughly 4, it's going to affect about $100 a house or $100 a property. which if you multiply by the number of properties we have, it's probably a $300,000 or $400,000 hit, I'm guessing off the top of my head. And we're going to have to keep the millage rate the same or increase it because property values continue to rise. And as they rise, the millage rate stays the same, but your taxes go up. So that will generate additional funds because we can't afford to take a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 hit to our bottom line.
So if I'm clear, what you're saying, you're counting on the increased value of properties to cover that?
Partially, yes. I am as well opposed to state interference in local issues.
Yeah, I don't know any municipality that agrees with the state. Mr. Bluestein, what's your position?
I think they should stay out, and if we're going to have to raise our millage, that's what we'll have to do if it passes. But I'm not for state. How about now?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Here you go. I'll get it soon. These are all experts over here. I'm not for the state telling us what to do, but it sounds to me that eventually we're going to just have to raise the millage to keep up with the loss of what we're going to have in taxes. And that's basically the bottom line.
Okay, but this is a ballot issue, so it will be the people who are going to tell you that. Okay. Yes or no? So you're saying what are you going to, I honestly, I don't know of any population that has turned down a cut in taxes.
Correct.
Just saying. So assuming that it passes, what do you think the city should do?
The city might have to raise the millage to meet what we're losing with the taxes that we're not collecting.
Okay. Mr. Vincent.
Thank you. I agree with you, ma'am. I think anytime you can take an opportunity to take the tax dollars out of the government, I think that's a great idea and put it in your pocket. However, yes, there is going to be a decrease in the ad valorem taxes that we receive because of allowing this Amendment 1 Homestead Act to take place. I'm in favor of it. But then again, that's why you elect your officials to make sure when things like this do happen, and it is a will of the voters, that we do get smart and we sharpen our pencils in our budget and create a way to save money, spend less money, create priority lists, what's a priority, what's not a priority, and earmark funds for those priorities, which is important to the town, and recommended by you, the voters. Remember, we are the listeners up here. We are the governing body of what you want, and that's what's important. So that being said, once this is determined and our finance director can figure out really what the bottom line is on that and what the dollar value is, then I think as a governing body we should have the responsibility and the fiscal responsibility to make the adjustments in our budget and where we need to cut and if we need to raise the millage.
Okay, well you already have a sense of how much you're going to lose, right?
Not yet. I have not sat down with the finance director on that. There is time for that, but that is important. But roughly at $3.60 per thousand, with the average home maybe in Lauderdale-By-The-Sea of $350,000, it's quite a bit of money. But I think that this town and the way we govern will give us the opportunity to make sure that would be a smooth transition. I trust our finance director and I trust the commission.
Mr. Brown, what would you do?
Thank you. Well, I have to disagree with everybody up here, and maybe I'm not understanding this issue the same way you are, but it was my understanding that under current law, any properties that are valued under $50,000, the owners don't pay any property taxes, and that this ballot question would raise that threshold from $50,000 to $100,000, where people would not have to pay any property taxes. There is virtually no property in Lauderdale-By-The-Sea that's not already worth more than $100,000. So my understanding of this ballot issue is that it wouldn't have any impact at all in Lauderdale-By-The-Sea. I would oppose, I'm going to vote against it because this is going to starve governments in other communities around Broward County. They're not going to have enough revenue to pay for their police departments and to clean their streets and everything else. So if my understanding of the ballot question is wrong, I'll apologize, but that's the way I read it. Thank you.
Okay. There's been quite a few articles about the establishment of a 5-year budget for salaries and pensions. Do you agree with that, and what's your position, Mr. Bluestein?
Is that a question, I guess? Do we budget for forward-looking expenses? Absolutely. I don't see why you wouldn't budget for a 5-year plan to figure out what you're going to need to pay your people.
For salaries and pensions?
Correct.
Okay. And as a follow-up, also on the 5-year, how much do you think should be held in reserve for capital and emergency disasters? Do you think that the city currently has enough in reserve?
I think they have, what I heard, they have about $2 million in reserves. And that's, you know, sounds like a lot of money, but a little more would be helpful, in my opinion.
Okay. Mr. Vincent?
Thank you. That's a great question. You know, it's a standard practice for project budgets in any government or any private business, if you will. Salaries should be no different. Putting aside standard COLAs, the cost of living adjustments that we all get, I believe salaries should be negotiated by each employee or employer based on their own definition of what they believe their value is for that particular job. But most importantly, merit-based increases should always be in the negotiation and budgeted as well.
Is that it? Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Look, we need to have good people working in this town, and you can't get good people if you don't pay them a good salary. Our salaries are, the positions are defined by the most part under Florida law, and there's a salary range within each position. And when you hire an employee, you hire them at a lower level, and as they produce and gain more experience, they move up the ladder in their salaries. And the salary increases in this town, we don't have a very big staff. We only have about 28 people on the entire payroll, not counting the 5 commissioners. It's not a lot of money. We've never had any difficulty budgeting for what little raises the employees are entitled to. So I don't see it as being that big of a concern overall. Thank you.
The reserves for capital and emergency?
I apologize. We have a 15% reserve right now, which is what the state recommends as a minimum. 15%. When we had Hurricane Irma last August, we didn't come close to touching the 15% with all the debris that we had to remove in this town and all the other damages. So 15% is fine, and I wouldn't change it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sokolow?
I believe that the current surplus is $2.5 million in the general fund. We also have surpluses in the parking fund and in the fire fund. We don't have a pension issue in this town because we don't do pensions. We do the state Florida retirement system. Each employee contributes part of their salary and the town matches part of it. So our pension contribution is an annual thing that can be adjusted with no long-term liability for the town. That needs to stay that way. I'm not in favor of having pensions with the town having large liabilities. As far as budgeting in advance, our finance people actually do a 5-year plan now. It's not line item, but it could very well be, and any prudent business does that. Thank you.
Okay. Start with you over here, Mr. Vincent. How do you feel about hiring outside consultants per job instead of in-house employees?
Actually, I'm a proponent of that. I believe that outsourcing, in the sense just to save money, no differently than what we did originally when I was elected. We came in and we went out for RFPs to basically remove the county from our building department because of how expensive the county was, and we were able to go out and get bids from private service providers to come in and do that for us. We did that with code, and we did that with parking, and we saved quite a bit of money doing that. So I have no problem with going out with outside vendors for a lot of things, but most critically, we do have an incredible workforce for the town of Lauderdale-By-The-Sea that has been here for many, many years and are retiring here, that are an intricate part of what this town is, and they need to be retained, and they need to be retained with proper salaries, allowing them to negotiate their salaries and their worth, as I suggested earlier. But key number one is to make sure you retain your top employees, and then key number two, what we can't do, we go out and get RFPs for in the private sector.
Okay. Mr. Brown, how do you feel about hiring outside consultants per job versus in-house employees?
Thank you. We have a very small professional staff in the town. We don't have employees who are specialists in every area of town administration and town management. And it doesn't make any sense for us to continue to hire more employees to do jobs that can be done better and more efficiently by hiring outside contractors to do them. I'm not so concerned about the money that's involved. We probably save money by contracting out. What I'm concerned about is performance. If the outside contractors are doing the job, whether it's parking enforcement or permitting or code enforcement or whatever, then that's fine with me. If they're not capable of doing the job and we need to look at bringing these positions back into the town administration, then so be it. But let's put the focus on performance and outcome and not on money. Thank you.
Mr. Sokolow?
Well, the town has built a very large outsourced force, starting with the police, fire, EMS, which are all outsourced. Therefore, we still have no pension contribution to make. Beyond that, our building department is outsourced. Our town architect and town engineer are outsourced. They're contractors. I believe in doing that. That way you can competitively bid the outsourced positions, and you can select the best value, best engineers, best architects, best everything at the right price. And I would propose continuing to do that wherever possible.
Thank you. Mr. Bluestein, do you favor?
I think this is a small town, and I like the idea of getting to know employees in this building and in other buildings that work for the town. And I would prefer to have the same faces in the town that you see from year to year to year, instead of outsourcing and bringing in new people that I think distracts from having a small town flavor.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll go with that. Mr. Brown, I'll begin with you. We're going to move on to the general topic of the form of government, term limits, and voting in general. Do you favor continuation of voting districts, and why?
Thank you. This isn't a topic that I would like to put up for referendum in the next election. We started the voting districts, the north and the south, after the north end of town was annexed into Lauderdale-By-The-Sea. And there was good reason to do it at that time, because it was a shaky marriage in the beginning, and we needed to make sure that both ends of the town felt that they were being properly represented on the commission. We are way beyond that now. Lauderdale-By-The-Sea today is nowhere what it was like 12 years ago. And personally, I would have no problem doing away with the district system and going to elect all commissioners at large. You get the most votes, you get the seat. However, I'm not going to make that decision myself on the commission. I would like that to be put on referendum and let the voters decide for themselves if that's the way they want to go in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Sokolow, how do you feel about the continuation of voting districts?
Well, it would clearly have to be a referendum, because I think it's incorporated in the town charter, if I'm not incorrect. So it would have to be a referendum change. I also don't see any real reason for the districts anymore. There may be some people in the south end of town who would disagree with that, and if so, I would be happy to support their position if they made it clear. Districts, as Mayor Brown or Commissioner Vincent said, sorry, Vice Mayor, too many years of calling you that, both of them. As they said, the reasons for it over the last 12 years have changed. There is a great deal of peace that goes on in this town. There is no more political infighting for the most part. And it would be good to keep it that way, but we don't need the districts.
Okay. Mr. Bluestein.
I agree. I don't think we need districts. It's such a small town to begin with. Separating from north and south, in my opinion, is a little silly.
That's it.
That's it.
Pretty succinct.
Can I answer
Oh, I'm so sorry.
that? Yeah, no.
Mr. Vincent.
Yes. I'm going to opt out on my three representatives up here, or candidates up here, and I'm going to say I believe The voters deserve to be heard in districts. It's about the one precious thing that we have in town, and that's to be heard, or in any city. Districts are the most common form of representation throughout our country for the voters in most all elections. It's the Senate, congressional, and local. We all want to know that we have a gentleman next door or a woman next door to be able to knock on their door and talk to. Regardless of the size of the town, I don't think anybody should be removed of that opportunity to have some representation, whether it's north, south, east, or west. I think it's an intricate part of government. I think it keeps government small, and it doesn't get out of hand when you start removing districts and then removing that one-on-one, face-to-face with your neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sokolov, I'll begin with you on this one. I don't live in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, but so this was a question that came to me from one of the constituents. I understand that the mayor must have a 2-year gap before running for commission, but the commissioners do not have that restriction. Does that need a change? First of all, is that true?
First of all, it's not exactly correct.
Okay.
You are allowed to have 2 4-year terms as a commissioner for a total of 8 years. When those 2 4-year terms are up, you can run for mayor for 3 consecutive 2-year terms. So you can, in theory, be on the commission for 14 years.
And what about the mayor, though?
The mayor, once he finishes being mayor, cannot run for the commission for 2 years, I believe. And I'm not sure if there's a restriction to have a prior service, but I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Okay, so that was the basic question. The mayor has to have a 2-year gap before running for the commission, presumably because the mayor was not on the commission prior to this?
No, the mayor is basically a commissioner who chairs the meetings.
Right, so, okay. So then...
I believe that's the way the term limit ordinance is written.
Got it. Does it need a change then? Is that what your point is?
No, I don't think it needs to change.
Okay. It's a convoluted question I got from one of the constituents. Does anyone, Mr. Bluestein, do you have a point of view about this? Because I like to jump over this. Do you, Mr. Vincent?
Yeah, I do actually. You know, we had a charter review 6 or 7 years ago, and I was sitting up here actually when we had this discussion, and we did address that commission seat being able to run for mayor after its full 2 terms. And then the gap for mayor was left in. I'm just looking at my notes. Our charter provides this discussion every 10 years. So I'd probably wait for that and entertain new suggestions at this time, but that doesn't mean we can't start the conversation now. And again, it's you, the voters, that are going to make this decision. You're the ones that are going to come up to us and speak. This is not a commission decision. We're not a strong mayor. We're not a strong commission that we decide what's best for you and you decide what's not best. So again, that's why we have the Charter Review Board every 10 years, and it's an important part of our town.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you. This issue is a bunch of baloney. This is one of the reasons why I started my newspaper back then, because this was the kind of junky legislation that this commission was voting on. How does it make any sense that somebody can serve on the commission and run for mayor, but you can't be the mayor and then run for commission? That law was passed exclusively to punish a man who was the former mayor at the time, to prevent him from being able to run for commission when his term was up as mayor. I don't like that kind of legislating. We need to put this on referendum at the next possible opportunity and get rid of this. It's a stupid law, and I don't support it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bluestein, this is your question first. Do you agree that it's okay to quit your seat to run for another seat and create an issue for the successor of that seat?
That's a loaded question, considering who's sitting on the dais today. Again? Okay, how's that? All right, what I said was that's a loaded question, and I know that's happened recently here. I'll be honest, I don't know enough about him stepping down and then wanting to run for mayor. How much of an impact is that going to be on the commission? So I really have a non-answer for that.
Okay. Mr. Vincent.
That's a great question, obviously. As I said in my opening statements, and I'd like to repeat what I said, there's a clear distinction between me and my opponent and why I'm running for mayor. My opponent quit his seat 2 years early to run for mayor. I call that running for title and not for the town. Honesty and transparency is a big part of an elected official, and when we get elected in Lauderdale-By-The-Sea, we sign a code of conduct that was legislated in our town back in 2010. And it assures that each one of us keep a clear, focused vision on why we were elected, and with the expectation of completing these full terms. And I did just that by the representation of you, the voters, putting me up here.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Here are the facts. Florida has a resign to run law. The purpose of that law is to discourage elected officials from holding one seat while they run for another seat. It gives them an advantage. I obeyed the law. I could have stayed on the commission until election day, but I chose to resign early so that the town would not have to pay to hold a special election to fill my seat. What I don't understand is why Commissioner Vincent didn't resign his seat. He holds one seat on the town commission now, and he's running for another, and it gives him a big advantage. I think that's wrong. He should have resigned his seat too. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have a follow-up 30-second rebuttals on these, but Mr. Sokolov, it's your turn to answer.
Do I get to be the final arbiter of this?
No, sir. You're just answering the first round, and then we'll do a 30-second rebuttal.
You know, I've heard both sides of this. My only issue with it is that the commission's normal replacement of 2 members every 2 years is altered when it happens. And so we will wind up this year with either 2 or 3 new people on the commission. And that's kind of an issue that normally doesn't happen.
Okay, so I'm going to start over here. Mr. Brown mentioned Mr. Vincent. There will be a 30-second rebuttal from Mr. Vincent, and then back to Mr. Brown on a rebuttal, 30 seconds. Linda?
Thank you.
Got it? Okay. Mr.
You know,
Vincent.
there's unintended consequences when you make poor decisions. Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, once said, when you're good at something, you don't quit. When you create an unneeded election, that's a poor decision. The reason why I didn't resign is because I completed my full 2 terms, and guess what? That makes me eligible now to run for mayor as it is in our charter. Simple as that. I chose to take the high road.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Chris is pretty mad that I'm running. He feels he's entitled to be the mayor of this town, and how dare I resign my seat and challenge him for the position and give the voters a choice in this election. I feel I'm the more qualified candidate in this race, and this whole idea that he should just be anointed as the new leader of Lauderdale-By-The-Sea without any opposition doesn't sit well with me, and that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have a second round, 30-second rebuttals. Mr. Vincent?
I'm not sure if it's worth the rebuttal, but let me just say that Mr. Brown for months, I believe, was wanting to know if the mayor was going to run for his 3rd term just for that reason, because if not, I think Mr. Brown had higher aspirations of possibly running for county commission. But then when he found out that Lamar Fisher was running, he says, I can't beat him. And then he decided, well, maybe I'll go on the Florida State Ethics Commission and make every elected official his worst nightmare. So I'm not sure where Mr. Brown is heading with this at all. And to resign your seat to do this, it just speaks volumes to me, and it should speak volumes to this town.
Mr. Brown, you have the last word.
I sure do. Bottom line, I obeyed the law. I'm running. If Commissioner Vincent wants to be the mayor, he can run against me, he can beat me, but I'm not backing down. I have no regrets about entering this race and giving the voters a choice in this town, and putting my qualifications up against his qualifications. And if he wants to whine about it, he's welcome to whine, but let's settle this on election day. Thank you.
Okay.
By the way, folks, I'm not mad.
All right. I believe I started with you on this question. There's been rebuttals on so many here.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, Mr. Brown, what about the relationship with the county commission? And the reason that this did not honestly come from the constituents, as you know, the League of Women Voters does a fair number of these forums. And this issue has come up in various cities around the county about the relationship between the city and the county commission. How do you view it, and is it in good shape, and does it need some kind of help, some kind of improvement?
Thank you. I've been the town's representative on the Broward County Transportation Board for 6 years. And I've gotten to know, there are 5 members of the Broward County Commission that also serve on that board along with me. I'm also very active in the Broward League of Cities, and there are Broward County commissioners that are active in the Broward League as well. So personally, I've gotten to know almost all of the Broward County commissioners very well. I'm working with them personally on a number of different issues right now. That's just speaking for myself. I'm very careful when I go into these meetings to make sure they understand that I'm only speaking for myself and that I don't have the authority to speak for the commission with them. But I've worked very hard to build a good working relationship with the county commissioners, particularly on the issues that impact us here in the town. And I'll continue to do that in the future. I like getting out and working at the higher levels to benefit our town. Thank you.
Mr. Sokolow.
I've been the town's representative, member of the board of the League of Cities for the last 4 years. I also know most of the commissioners. I have a good relationship with them. And I think the relationship is fine between the town, except when the commission, in my opinion, oversteps like they do in Tallahassee sometimes and tries to preempt local government. And then I have an issue with them. And that will continue to be an issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Bluestein.
I'm not here long enough to have any issues with people on the dais, so I'm going to opt out of this one.
Okay. Mr. Vincent.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have a great relationship. Again, this gets back to districts and why we have representation. And Chip Lamarcker for District 4 is our representative for the county, and he's a phone call away for all of us. And any one of us can reach out to Commissioner Lamarcker, and which we all have done, I'm sure. So I think the relationship is great, and we need to continue to do that, and we need to continue to have our districts just for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe, Mr. Sokolow, you're the next one up for this question.
Okay.
The present setup of the commission manager government, are the qualifications for a manager right now adequate?
I believe they are. I think our commissioner, our town manager and his staff do a superb job. The town runs efficiently, the town runs economically. Bud, who's our current manager, is different in the way he does things than our former manager, Connie Hoffman. He was her assistant. We have a great staff.
Okay. And a follow-up question to that, again, pardon me, because I don't always know the setup here. There's an annual review of the town manager?
There is. It's a performance review. We grade him on a number of issues. There are 5 or 6 major categories, and each of us does a rating on a scale of 1 to 5 for each of the categories, and the town clerk compiles the results, and the mayor, I believe, has a performance review and goes over that with them.
Okay. Mr. Bluestein, the present setup of the commission manager, are the qualifications for manager adequate, and also the annual review of the manager?
I'm not sure of the processes, but speaking to a lot of the staff, I'm hearing just very positive things about their work ethic and results for the town. So apparently what they're doing they're doing right.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Vincent?
Thank you. Yeah, we also addressed this when we did the charter review 7 years ago with respect. That did come up, and the Charter Review Board did review that to make sure that the qualifications for our town manager was in place and being followed as per the charter. There may have been some issues in the past, and we wanted to make sure and be clear that these issues didn't come up again in the future. So I'm comfortable with what we have in place as per the charter. Again, that could be reviewed at the next review board if the town and the residents and the voters see that that needs to be addressed.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, thank you. We did change the qualifications a couple of years ago to provide for a broader range of academic degrees and experience on the part of eligible candidates. We did that in part because we wanted to make sure we got a good range of candidates applying for the job and that we hired the best person. And also because there was a past history in the town of hiring people for that position who did not meet the qualification. So we've tightened it up. I'm fine with the qualifications that are out there now, and I'm fine with the annual review that the commissioners do of the town manager. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bluestein, start with you on this question. I'm moving on to the category of infrastructure. There's been a lot of ups and downs concerning the underground utilities and the work that has to be done. What should be done?
I understand, talking to the city manager, that the sewers are being repaired for the next 50 years or so. The streets, some streets need to be repaved. In Terramar Island and north, there's flooding issues. But other than that, I don't think there's that much going on that is in disarray, except what I mentioned before, the hotels and the marina.
So as a follow-up to that, should new hotels pay for these updates?
Hotels, the new hotels?
Yeah.
Pay for their? Yeah, absolutely.
The city's underground utility work, should they be chipping in more?
I don't know what they're chipping in, but I imagine that has to be negotiated between the hotels and the city. So I'm a non-answer on that.
Okay. Mr. Vincent?
Thank you. When you're asking the underground utilities about electric as well?
Yes.
Yeah, that's been beat up ad nauseum in the town, and we've learned from FP&L that it's just not going to happen anytime now in the near future with respect to the power poles, especially down Elmore and along most of our streets. But what we do have in place on Elmore is anytime there's a permit put in for reconstruction, and you have overhead lines, you pay a fee to make sure that those lines do get buried underground, that you are not allowed to continue to go overhead from the building to the pole, that they do have to go underground. And that's been a big help. But unfortunately, FP&L and the expense to even do that is just enormous, and it wouldn't be. It's not feasible. We all want it. Trust me, we would love to have it and wave that magic wand. But it's just not happening yet. We haven't really come up with a plan. And previous Commissioner Dodd was a liaison and spearheaded that with FP&L. And he worked tremendously hard at that. A very knowledgeable man in the business, and even he couldn't pull and wave the magic wand on that. So,
Mr. Brown, what's your opinion?
Thank you. I had this conversation with a gentleman over on Allenwood Drive over the weekend. He was very adamant. He took me out into his backyard and showed me the sagging power lines, and he said, I want these power lines buried. And my response was, you can get them buried. There's nothing in the law against it, but the neighborhood has to come up with the money to pay for it, and all the neighbors have to agree to do it. And that might be practical in some neighborhoods in the town. It's certainly not practical on Elmore Drive, where we have other issues too, such as where you're going to put the transformers if you take them out of the air and you have to put them on the ground. What I've been working on is trying to bring outside income into the town. I did get the $2 million federal grant to help pay for some of the improvements on Elmore Drive. To the extent that that frees up additional funds in our capital improvement budget, that's fine. Maybe someday we can apply some of that to burying the power lines, but this is not something that's a high priority, and it's not something that's going to happen soon. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Sokola?
Well, I think everybody likes underground power lines, they think, until a hurricane comes and the power feeding them disappears. So underground power lines don't help a lot. They flood, the transformers flood. The village of Sea Ranch Lakes has underground power lines, and their power was out as long or longer than anywhere else in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. So underground power, oh, and besides that, I think to do the Elmore Drive piece would cost more than the rest of the Greenway project. Just somewhere in the order of $3 to $4 million. As far as the rest of the infrastructure, the sewers have been almost completely relined. That project's being finished now, and they're good, as someone said, for 50 years. The streets have a paving schedule, and it's on schedule. It happens every so many years. So I think the infrastructure's in pretty good shape.
Okay. Mr. Vincent, I'm going to begin with you on this question. Sea level rise. What does Lauderdale-by-the-Sea need to do to prepare, and what are you doing now?
Thank you. Sea level rise obviously is a worldwide and global issue, and it does need to be addressed, and it's not going to be a solution that's going to be addressed independently, I think, by anyone, but I think if we all do our part, that would be great. But one of the more convenient solutions to dealing with that would maybe do a beach nourishment. But however, that's only a temporary solution, and it's a very controversial subject. There are many new technologies being researched and studied right now and attempted to control beach erosion and also high water tide. But it's important that we follow and learn more about those studies and how to implement to restore and maintain and protect our properties while protecting marine life as well. So there's a lot of components to sea level rise, a lot of components to protecting the beaches, but there is some great technologies out there that will be able to suffice. And as far as getting into major detail, I'm not an expert on that. I don't think any of us are up here, but it does need to be monitored and addressed.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. It's really hard when you represent a small town like this to wrap your head around a gigantic concept like sea level rise. You feel really helpless, like what can I do to help protect this town? In December, I represented the town at the South Florida Climate Change Conference, and I have to tell you, I was stunned. They had speakers from all around the country, and especially all around Florida, and there were a lot of very specific scientific, technical, engineering solutions that were being put on the table that other communities around the state and around the country are implementing right now. And I came away from there very enthused that there are a lot of things that we can do in this town now, not only to deal with the problems that we experience normally, such as hurricanes and high winds, but also these bigger problems down the road, such as sea level rise. I am personally in the process of writing a comprehensive beach management plan for the town right now. It's a big job. I'm not telling you it's going to be done next week, but this is something that I'm going to be working on very hard in the years ahead. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sokolow?
I live on the ocean, so sea level rise is clearly a concern. Thus far, we haven't seen very much of it. We have beach erosion, which has been going on here forever. The sea oats that Mr. Brown has championed in a lot of places are helping build dunes, which does help the problem, but our 2 miles of beach is going to be kind of hard to have us implement anything until new technologies that are proven and that are cost effective have become available. I don't believe we have the resources to create our own program to manage our 2 miles of beach. And sea level rise also implements itself on the other side of the island, on the intercoastal, where the waters are rising. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bluestein?
I was actually trying to find some research on these issues, and I found that in Panama City in February 7th to 9th, they had a whole symposium on these issues, on new technologies, on beach erosions, and what could be done. And it would be nice to maybe have representation from the city just to attend to meet the people that are kind of in the know or can maybe give us some guidance.
Okay. Mr. Brown, Lauderdale-by-the-Sea is debt-free. Do you continue that, or do you carry some debt to get the development going, such as the town hall here in Jarvis and the public safety building?
I am adamantly against making any changes to this town hall complex until, number one, we've completed the Elmar Drive Greenway project. You can't tear up Elmar Drive and tear up A1A at the same time and expect traffic to move through this town. And it's not the right place to put the money. I am open to the idea of building a new public safety building. It bothers me that the police and the fire and the ambulance people are in a building that doesn't have central air conditioning. It's a very flimsy building. They have drugs and guns and prisoners in there, and it'd be easy to break into that building. All of our equipment is sitting out on the street, the fire trucks and the police trucks and police cars and the ambulances. If we could come up with a plan to build some kind of a new public safety complex that would address these concerns, I would be very open to that, and I'd be open to financing possibilities because I think that is a priority, but I do not want to put the town in debt building a new town hall complex.
Okay, so just as a follow-up clarification here, it's okay to carry the debt for the development of something like a public safety building, but not the town hall Jarvis. Is that right?
I said I'm open to that, but
Open.
I need to see some specifics before I say 100% yes on that. Thank you.
Mr. Sokolow?
Well, I have stated repeatedly that I am against any debt for the town. I believe that the police, fire, EMS building needs to be remodeled, not necessarily torn down and rebuilt, but at least remodeled extensively, perhaps added on to. And I think it can be done over a reasonable period out of current operating revenues and capital budgets without encumbering the town with debt. And that's what I would be in favor of.
Okay. Mr. Bluestein?
I'm not in favor of taking on heavy debt. What I'd like to see is the town plan for these expenses in these buildings over the next 5 to 10 years and have money available at that point rather than take debt. And that would be my answer to you.
Mr. Vincent?
Yes. As I spoke earlier, you know, we've done numerous charades on this, and I said we've recently completed workshops, various town hall meetings. We had renderings and drawings that were done by FAU that were absolutely spectacular. The kids that did that, we were just so very proud of them. It gave them the opportunity even to hone into their skills and also give us an idea of what to expect. They obviously couldn't do costs, but we did do some value engineering on it. And, you know, you're talking 20, 25, 30, $35 million at this time. I don't think anyone in this town or in this commission or any future commission in the near future is going to take on that kind of debt. So I vehemently oppose that at any time. But again, this will always go out to you, the voters. It'll always go out to a referendum with a debt like that and how we're going to pay for it, whether it's going to be a bond or whether it's going to be paid for by our leaving mayor here, Mr. Sasser. But no, it's a debt that this town is not, it exceeds our budget. So I don't see this happening anytime in the near future.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the category of parking and transportation. I'll add right here, I think this is my third round with forums here in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. I think this issue has been on the questionnaire every single time I've come here. So, Mr. Sokolow, the question is, parking garage, do we need one? Should it be a referendum item? Should it be public versus private funding to build and operate?
Yes, all of the above. At least the bathrooms are off your list.
Okay, but it says public versus private, which one?
Okay, I'm not sure I believe that we need to have a 3 or 4 story garage like Pompano has built, which thus far is still pretty much empty. And they spent $25 million on it. If there were to be a garage, I would not advocate it being anywhere in this general area, I would promote it being, I would want it to be west, and I would want it to be a public-private partnership where perhaps the town finds the land and some group, if it's economically feasible, builds a garage. I don't think it's something that we need. My wife, who is in the audience, disagrees with me because she thinks it's hard to find a parking space. If you were born and grew up in New York, you know that you have to walk 2 blocks from where you park to where you're going. And you can. Thank you.
Mr. Bluestein, parking garage.
I'm not for a parking garage. I'm only here 2.5 years and I've never been blocked out of parking downtown. I think there's ample parking, and I think once Pompano gets done with doing their infrastructure on the pier, they're going to be drawing people away from here. And I don't think it's necessary to build a parking garage at this time.
Should it be put up for a referendum?
Yes. Yes. I mean, if that's what the people want, but I'm not for it personally.
Okay.
That's what you're asking.
But you'd be willing to put it on the ballot for the people to tell you what they wanted or didn't want?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Parking garage.
Is that to me?
Do you need it?
Yeah.
Should it be a referendum item? And if so, would it be public or private funding to build and operate?
Well, number one, if it's going to be taxpayer dollars, it should always be referendum, regardless if it's a parking garage or whatever. Again, we've done a capital improvement in our downtown district from A1A over to the Intracoastal, and we've created some great parking places. We've added a lot of parking spots, and we've created a really great environment. Sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for. And I think we're just at a point now where we're still able to hold that Lauderdale-By-The-Sea charm and quaint and be able to go downtown, whether it's via an NEV, a bicycle, or walk. We've become a walkability town. We are encouraging that, and that's the purpose of the design that we've done along Commercial Boulevard. And it's working great. Once we get the Elmar project up and going and completed, it's going to be another reason to want to walk Elmar Drive. But, at this time, that's something we're going to have to look at, and there are ways and creative ways to put 1-, 2-, 3-story parking garages in without even knowing it's a parking garage. So we have to be open to the designs of potential garages in the future if that's what the town wants.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you. I'm opposed to building a parking garage in the town. It will never be occupied enough year-round to generate enough revenues to pay for itself. We have plenty of parking spaces in the town right now. They just don't happen to be where everybody wants them to be. My approach, I'm taking a very different approach on this issue, is I'm working on a number of issues to try to get people to leave their cars at home and to enjoy the benefits of this town without driving there. We have a Pelican hopper in town right now that's very underutilized. It doesn't get into the right neighborhoods. It's very expensive. And we need to find ways to improve the service on the Pelican hopper or to replace it and put in a better service that'll get people to the supermarket, it'll get people to Holy Cross Hospital, and be a lot cheaper than the Pelican hopper. We just approved a new shuttle bus service that you can call that picks you up at your home in a condo or a single family home and takes you downtown free of charge. These are the kinds of approaches we need so that we don't have to build a parking garage or create more parking spaces. Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Would you favor a referendum?
I never have any problem with putting a referendum up, but if it was up, I would work against it because I do not believe the residents of this town want the additional traffic coming in for a parking garage. So I would not support it, but if they want to put it on the ballot, people want to get signatures, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bluestein. It's been mentioned a couple of times just in this round here. Do you support the Pelican hopper, and would you also investigate other alternatives? If so, what ideas do you have?
I've used the Pelican hopper, but I understand that it's expensive. It runs, I think they told me, $150,000 a year, and it's really only utilized about 100 rides a week, meaning 50 people. So if there was less expensive availability of some kind of transportation, I would be for it, But I think you need to have transportation for people that live in the city, somehow.
Okay. Mr. Vincent, how do you feel? Do you support the Pelican Hopper, and should alternatives be investigated?
100%. I support the Pelican Hopper, and we monitor and address the schedule and the ridership of the Pelican Hopper. It has always met the ridership requirements, and it's not 100 riders a week, it's up to 50, 80 riders a day. We get anywhere from 7 to 10 riders an hour, so how that adds up to $100 a week in my math adds up to quite a bit more, and why we keep the Pelican Hopper. It's been part of this town for a decade or longer, and the town's goal is always focused on increasing the ridership for that and operating in most efficient times. This is one of our most important means of transportation for our residents, for our visitors, and for our seniors. It's really one of the only mode of transportation for our seniors that are not equipped with computers, not equipped with apps and cell phones to call up an Uber. They have that opportunity now if they have that technology, so they can use it. But the ones that don't, you can't strip the Pelican Hopper out from under them, which my opponent would love to do. And I think that would be disingenuous.
Mr. Brown?
Yes. Well, let's do a show of hands on this. How many people in the audience take the Pelican Hopper? About 4 or 5. And that's my whole point. The Pelican Hopper costs us $160,000 a year to operate. And we did a ridership survey. We had an intern ride the bus for a whole week, and the numbers showed that we average 100 riders a week. That means every resident of Lauderdale-by-the-Sea is paying $28 a year in taxes to subsidize a handful of people who are using the Pelican Hopper. That's not fair. And it's not fair that the Pelican Hopper doesn't go into every neighborhood. And it's not fair that people have to wait 30 or 40 minutes in the hot sun or in the rain to get picked up by the Pelican Hopper, or to get a ride home from the supermarket and then have to walk 3 or 4 blocks carrying their groceries. We need to look at how can we best provide transportation services for the residents of this town. Thank you.
Mr. Sokolov?
I will admit that I have never ridden the Pelican Hopper. I either walk 1.75 miles from my house down to Commercial Boulevard, or I take my car and find a parking space. The Pelican Hopper is great for people who aren't able to drive. Many of them have time and are willing to wait. There are alternatives presently. You've got Uber, you've got Lyft, you've got ride-sharing services. You have the new Uber ride-sharing service that I think there's just starting. But those don't need to be subsidized, nor should they be, by the town. There are new technologies coming, which I think if we don't rush and wait and ignore the garage, because the garage is going to become a white elephant in 10 or 15 years. If you read anything about future of transportation, we're going to have autonomous little cars. They're going to be running around Lauderdale-by-the-Sea, picking people up and dropping them off. Thank you.
There's been a request because of audience participation. Mr. Bluestein, do you care to do any kind of follow-up comment on the Pelican Hopper?
Follow-up? No,
You're okay with
I'm okay.
with your position? Mr. Vincent?
Yeah, I would just like to say, for those at home that are watching who are not able to be recognized, not able to be counted, not able to raise their hand, I just want to say that anyone that has raised their hand here and raised their hand at home, you've been ignored. And that's not what Lauderdale-by-the-Sea is. We don't basically and necessarily make decisions on a show of hands when it comes to our seniors, our elderly, to get the Holy Cross, to get to the drugstores for their prescriptions. This Pelican Hopper is an intricate part, and we will do whatever we need to do to make sure we hit the budget to maintain that for those people that dearly need it. And for those of you at home who raise your hands, I saw you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Mr. Brown?
Well, I just say that I think that this audience tonight is probably a representative cross-sample of the whole town, and the percentage of people who raise their hands tonight that say they use the Pelican Hopper is probably very representative of the entire town. That's my guess. Obviously, I don't know for sure. And I like the Pelican Hopper. I take it a lot myself, but we can do better. It's not fair to make everybody in this town pay $28 a year for a bus that doesn't even get into their neighborhood and that they don't have any access to and that does not provide very convenient service, particularly to the supermarket and to Holy Cross Hospital. I love the Pelican Hopper, but I think we can do better. Thank you.
Mr. Sokolov, do you have any other follow-up comment from that?
Not really. I think I've stated my position. The Pelican Hopper serves a purpose for the people who use it, and it needs to stay. We may be able to tweak it to improve the speed, change the routes. There's lots of things that can be done. It might cost more, but it may well be worth it, because if you do more with it, it may offset the cost.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Vinson, I'll start with you on this question. There were a lot of questions about the pedestrian greenway on Elmore Drive. How can you get this to be moved forward?
Well, unfortunately, recently, the commission just found out about the delay in the Elmore Greenway project. We were unaware of that. It was pretty much, we were blindsided by that in our last commission meeting, and I am very disappointed on that. However, this is our next major capital improvement project, and it will involve the rebeautification of our most prestigious gateway to our beaches and the walkability and what people love to do early in the mornings. We've been spearheading this project since 2010, and the new design will include the wider sidewalks, landscaping, medians, and other great features. And I will be the liaison for the infrastructure on that and make sure that that project moves along. I'll work closely with staff. I'll work closely with the contractors on that project, and to make sure that the improvements of this will be the best yet in Lauderdale-by-the-Sea.
Mr. Brown.
Yeah, thank you. I have to correct that statement. There has been no delay on the Greenway project. When I got this project approved by the County Transportation Board in 2014, we went on to the state's 5-year funding schedule. There are projects ahead of us on the funding schedule. We were told from day one it would take us 5 years to move up the ladder to where we would get funded. We reached the first threshold last August when the engineering and design contract was awarded to the engineering firm. They should be releasing their first artist renderings of the project in the next few weeks. We will go into public hearings at that point. We're scheduled for construction start in 2020, and I would remind you that 2020 actually starts, fiscal 2020 starts in July 1 of 2019. This project is right on schedule. There's been no delay, and I cannot believe that Commissioner Vincent wants to be in charge of it based on his record of other infrastructure improvements in the town. Thank you.
Mr. Sokolow?
Would you mind, this has wandered so far, would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. The pedestrian greenway on Elmore Drive has received a lot of comment, both from the questions I received, and it's been alluded to a couple times earlier this evening. How can we make this move forward?
It's going to take lobbying, it's going to take lobbying, and it's going to take lobbying, because apparently it has now become the project's not going to be out for bid until sometime in 2019 and fiscal 2020, which starts October 1. And it is supposedly going to take 2 years to build, so it's not going to be done until sometime in 2022, and I just don't think that's acceptable, and we need to exert whatever pressure we can on the Department of Transportation and MPO and every place else we can to try and get it done quicker.
Okay. Mr. Bluestein?
I saw renderings of the project, and it looks fantastic, and if it looks anything like the end of commercial, if it takes a little longer, if it takes a little bit more money, I'm 100% for it.
That's it? Okay. Going to move on to segue into the quality of life here in the city. I believe I began with you, Mr. Vincent, on the last question, so Mr. Brown. The Army Corps of Engineers carried out the major beach restoration in 2013. How did you vote on this project? And in the future, should condos and beachfront businesses be required to grant easements to expedite the repair process? Mr. Brown, please.
Thank you. Our beach was almost destroyed in 2012 by Superstorm Sandy. We had 6 to 8 foot cliffs along the property line that you had to jump down to get onto the beach. And that sand never would have come back naturally. So the Army Corps of Engineers stepped up to the plate. They offered us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rebuild our beach. At no cost to the town, they offered to come in and do a multi-million-dollar sand replenishment project. I sponsored that project here in town on the town commission. I went to all the meetings. I was there when every environmental group signed off on it, when every governmental organization signed off on it. Commissioner Vincent voted against putting the free sand on the beach. I don't understand his vote, and I hope that he will give us an honest explanation tonight as to why he did it. I also sponsored a second project in 2015 to put additional sand on the beach to widen the beach. Commissioner Vincent voted against that as well. So you want to talk about quality of life? What's a beach town without a beach? Thank you.
Mr. Brown, a clarification here. Should condos and beachfront businesses be required to grant easements to expedite the repair process?
Absolutely not. I attended a meeting at the Sea Ranch Club 2 years ago. There were at least 100 people there, and they did not want to grant an easement to the Army Corps of Engineers, even though I told them I thought it was the right thing to do. Because if we have a storm, the Army Corps needs to mobilize their equipment. They need to come onto your property and to push the sand around. I think that's the right thing to do, but I do not think it's the right thing for the government to mandate it. That's a decision that the Sea Ranch Club made. I respect their decision. I just disagree with it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sokolov?
I missed the first beach restoration vote, but I believe I would have voted in favor of it, as I did for the second beach restoration vote. Even though, as it turned out, they put not 1 ounce of sand behind my building. They stopped, the Corps of Engineers stopped the beach renourishment project about 200 yards north of my building, kind of at the border of Lauderdale-By-The-Sea and Pompano, and they started it again about a mile south of my building. As it happened, all the sand has since washed down from Pompano and from Hillsborough Beach, and so our beach all through the town is nice and wide again. I would be in favor of it. I think it's important. There are all kinds of environmental issues that people question, but it's something that we need for our quality of life.
Mr. Bluestein?
Oh, and excuse me, if I could,
Yes, sure.
the other question that I missed. No,
in the future for the easements?
We didn't require anybody the last time, but everybody saw a great big picture of a area up in Palm Beach County where the association had refused to grant the easement, and there was a huge lake on the beach because they just skipped it.
So you believe they should be required?
No, I think they should let your conscience be your guide, but no, it should not be required because there are consequences if you choose not to.
Mr. Bluestein, how do you feel about this?
I don't know why anybody wouldn't want the Army Corps of Engineers coming to your buildings and your businesses to repair. So I can't agree that they should be forced to, but I think that it's a good idea and they should allow them to come in and do the fixing, and because it's not a permanent thing for them to be there.
So as a clarification, even though you didn't have the opportunity, you would have voted for this project?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Vincent?
Thank you. First, let me start off on a few things. Anytime you have property and you haven't given it up to this point, I think you need to look really hard and why somebody wants to come in and take it, because that's just the beginning of taking property elsewhere. Number one, all of a sudden in 2018, it's important to have that little piece when it wasn't important for the last 100 years. Mark Brown has ignored every environmental concern bringing sand into this beach, number one. If you go back to the March 5th, 2012 discussion on the beach nourishment, 9 people spoke and 9 people were against. 9 people were against, and nobody was for it. Dan Clark, the director of Cry of the Water, opposed the project because the reef was buried and destroyed from the 1980s Beach Nourishment Project. And then Cry of the Water sued and stopped the work in segment 2 of the 2005 beach segment. There's no such thing as free sand. And there's no such thing as a temporary measure to fix a permanent problem. It's incredibly expensive. There's many ways to do things, but you have to be prudent and you have to be smart. It's not uncommon for beach renourishment projects to cost up to $100 million, depending on where, how, and the size of the beach. Although some projects may have private financing and backing and also may be free, many of these projects wind up being funded by you, the taxpayers. The $100 million, which should also go to road repair, infrastructure development, social programs, pelican hoppers. There are a lot of other things to do, especially when you're just ignoring the environmental concerns. And that is, and I quote that from Crystal Lombardo of 5/19/2015, who's an editor for the Vision Launch. This is what she does, and this is what her expertise is. When I voted against it, I made that responsible choice to reject potentially contaminated sand that was not indigenous in our area.
Mr.
Mark
Vincent, your
Brown
time
voted
is
for an
up.
approach that could ruin our coral reefs and our natural resources and our natural source of renourishment moving forward,
Thank you.
and affecting our marine life as well.
Okay, I'm going to move on. We're running out of time here.
Nope.
Oh, we did? You're right.
Your name? You call my name all night.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, we have a 30-second rebuttal situation again. Mr. Brown, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. Let me just reiterate that Commissioner Vincent voted twice against putting the sand on the beach. I don't think that was in the best interest of the town. I didn't quite get his explanation. He did cite some environmental concerns. He cited Dan Clark from Cry of the Water. Dan Clark signed off on this project. The Sierra Club signed off on the project. The Audubon Society signed off on the project. They dropped their lawsuit. There were no environmental issues pending at the time the project was approved. So he can throw up an excuse for you, but it doesn't have any backing to it. He voted against putting sand on our beach.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Vincent?
The reason why they signed off on it is because they had to reevaluate where the sand was going to go and make sure that they didn't disrupt the natural reefs and they didn't disrupt the natural course of the environment. It wasn't that simple. Nothing just happens with another magic wand that Mr. Brown seems to have quite a bit of. Again, there is responsible ways to do things and there's irresponsible ways to do things, and then there's times you need to sit down, talk, work hard, and if the beach nourishment was the right thing to do, so be it. It's done.
Okay. Thank you. I believe I started that with Mr. Brown. Is that correct, Mr. Brown? Right. No, I mean the first round of the questions. So this goes back to Mr. Sokolov, and because we are running out of time, I'm going to combine a couple of the questions. Should medical marijuana dispensaries be allowed in town? Sober homes, they're quite a contentious issue in residential areas. What's your stand on it? And vacation rentals in residential areas, what's your opinion? So 3 of them.
The trifecta.
Yeah. Well, it's all about quality of life. We can do 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Although I don't think it'll take me that long. Medical marijuana, the commission has already addressed and said no, not in our town. The state legislature in its wisdom gave us 2 choices. We could either approve medical marijuana dispensaries subject to them being subject to the same zoning as normal drugstores. We could not impose special regulations for them, such as distances to churches or schools or whatever those regulations are. So the town commission voted to say no. As far as sober homes, we have done whatever regulation could be done, and beyond that, all we can do is lobby the legislature, because this is another area that, well, this one's preempted by the federal government under ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, so we have very little ability to deal with issues on it other, again, than to lobby Congress, talk to our congressmen, our senators, etc. It's an issue that is unfortunately over our heads. We can do some regulation of number of people allowed based on the number of bedrooms. There's not much else we can do. We can be careful about having our police check people that are walking up and down the streets from these places, but again, you have to be very careful about bordering on harassment. Finally, the question of
Vacation rentals.
Vacation rentals, the state, again, has preempted local government regulation. We were fortunate that before the state law was passed, we had a real small window where we were able to get some regulation in on minimum number of days is 7 days. Beyond that, there is unfortunately not much we can do except police the people and make sure the behavior is appropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Bluestein? The issues are medical marijuana dispensaries, should they be allowed in town, sober homes in residential areas, and vacation rentals in residential areas.
You're
What's your
asking
stand?
us if we're in favor.
Yeah, what's your stand on each of these?
I prefer to have a no to all three. I don't want medical marijuanas if we don't need to have it here. I prefer not to have sober homes here. And what was the third one?
Vacation rentals?
Yeah, prefer not to have.
Are you familiar with what the law is on sober homes?
I'm not familiar with the laws are, but if we have to have them, we have to have them. But I prefer, if you're asking me if we want them here, I prefer not to have them here.
Okay, yeah, there's a federal law, ADA.
Right, I heard what you
All
said.
right.
But I thought
And
the question
vacation
is-
rentals, residential use is a state preemption, so
Right.
you would be against that?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Vincent?
Thank you. Mr. Sokolow really did a great job in opining on, I think, how we all feel, and covered a lot of the issues, especially with vacation rentals. It's a property rights issue, but we were able to preempt the amount of stays, nights that we can do that prior to the state coming in and taking that home rule away from us. The sober homes, again, they're protected by the ADA. There isn't much we can do on that, and we need to respect the law of the ADA for many reasons, because it's a very broad, it's broad language and it's broad rules, and it protects those who need to be protected. But we did preempt also, there was an attempt with a sober home that came in and wanted to have more people staying in the rooms that were allowed, but we preempted that and said, no, this is what the law is, we're not going to allow any more than that. Again, they've got what they want, and we did the best we could to make sure that we keep our town where we want it. With respect to marijuana, Mark Brown voted to have a marijuana dispensary possibly on any corner in this town. The rest of the commission did the responsible thing and kept them out of Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. The one thing we can't do is take it away from the drugstores. They're allowed to by the law, which was voted in this state unanimously, and I respect that. But there's no city in this county that wants to have it in their backyard or next door to them, and we preempted and did not allow any marijuana dispensaries to come in this town other than what's allowed by law in your CVS or Walgreens.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. The town commission voted last year not to allow a medical marijuana dispensary in town. The vote was 4-1. I was the only no vote. The reason I voted no was because 82% of the residents of Lauderdale-by-the-Sea voted in favor of the medical marijuana constitutional amendment. It would have been pretty arrogant of me to substitute my judgment for that of 82% of the residents of this town. Medical marijuana is already legal in 29 states. It's not that hard for Florida to set up a model based on how the other states are already doing it. Why should a resident of Lauderdale-by-the-Sea who is in pain and who needs some relief from that pain and who has a valid doctor's prescription for medical marijuana, why should they have to drive 25 miles to fill their prescription? That's not fair. On the other two issues, Our hands are tied as to how much we can regulate the sober homes and the vacation rentals, but we do have a lot of authority to enforce, whether they're noise violations or trash violations or parking violations. And I can only encourage people in the town, if you live next door to one of these properties and you see the violations, you've got to call the police and turn them in. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's one last question that was submitted, and it's kind of a dual question due to the recent events in Parkland. Number one, to ask each candidate what's your position on gun control, and would you vote for a gun shop? Mr. Bluestein, I believe you're first.
What was the second part of that?
Would you vote for allowing a gun shop in Lauderdale-By-The-Sea?
Some of the guns I think are not necessary. The AKs and automatic weapons, I've come to believe that it can be a necessary evil, as we've seen. And as far as having a gun shop in town, as long as it's legal and they do what they're supposed to do within the law, I'm not against having a gun shop in the town.
Mr. Vincent?
Yeah. Second Amendment right. That's huge, and it's there for a reason. The tragedies that unfolded in Parkland 2 weeks ago are very close and dear to all of us. It is a major tragedy. My daughter sits here as a senior in high school. My daughter was born literally one city block from Stoneman Douglas High School. We lived in Parkland. We lived literally, I could throw a rock and hit the building. So that hit home. It's a tragedy, and there are things that need to be done. We need to ban assault weapons. We need to probably raise the age of when you can receive a gun. There has to be extensive background checks. As you hear gun issues, mental issues, it's all of the issues. And it's something that needs to be looked at, and it needs to be looked at hard. And with respect to gun shops in our town, I believe our ordinances probably ban that already. We've probably been ahead of that, and I would not want to see it in our town.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. We don't have any jurisdiction over gun issues in the town, but if we did, I would vote for a ban on the sale of assault weapons. I would vote for a ban on the sale of armor-piercing ammunition. I would vote for a minimum 7-day waiting period for the purchase of a gun, especially at gun shows where there is no waiting period right now, and there's no way to check whether the purchaser has some kind of mental history or criminal background. And I would vote for a ban on kits that you can buy through the mail or online and assemble your own gun where it doesn't even have a serial number that can be traced. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. We closed our high school on the first day of hunting season because so many of the kids went out and hunted. And when I was in the Boy Scouts, I learned how to shoot a gun, although I didn't really care for it. So I'm not an anti-gun person, but this is ridiculous. This heavy-duty stuff doesn't belong in people's hands, and I am opposed to opening a gun shop in town.
Okay. Mr. Sokolow?
Very honestly, I don't know whether we have an ordinance that bans gun shops. I would be opposed to having one in town. I don't see really why we need one. As Mr. Brown said, I believe, or Mr. Vincent, that there is a state law, again, that prohibits us, and if we up here were to vote in favor of a ban on any kind of guns, we are all subject to arrest and imprisonment. That's what the state law says.
And a $5,000 fine.
And a $5,000 fine.
Yeah.
So it's nothing that in the current era is going to come before this commission. I'm personally opposed to the sale. It makes no sense to sell semi-automatic rifles. Nobody needs them. You don't need them to hunt. You don't need them to fish. And you sure don't need them to shoot kids in school. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a postscript to the whole conversation about guns, tonight in Weston, there is a vote going on in the city commission, the city of Weston, on various issues relating to guns, gun sales, and also to sue the state. So just wanted you all to know you might want to look at the headlines tomorrow morning and see what happened. Okay, so I think we'll start with the wrap-up. So 1 minute each, please. And since I believe we began with you, Mr. Brown, is that correct?
I did the first round.
Right. No. Mr. Sokolov, you're first on the wrap-up.
As you've heard, I have significant experience in city government, government finance, Broward County government, and as a small business owner. I have a long history in this area, including Lauderdale-By-The-Sea for 7 years and 22 years within 1 mile of where we are sitting tonight. I am for small government that provides excellent service to residents. I'm for a healthy, robust local economy fueled by great businesses. I'm opposed to projects that will result in higher taxes or in the town incurring debt. Since I've been serving on the commission, tax rates have gone down every year. We have accomplished much as an experienced collegial town commission working together and using our combined expertise. Experience counts, and I offer my experience to the town for 4 more years. Please vote for me on Tuesday, March 13th, or send in your absentee ballots tomorrow while they still count.
Mr. Bluestein.
Okay, I don't have a script, but I'm going to tell you why I'd like to be commissioner. Unlike any of the gentlemen up here, they don't have the job that I have, which is a fiduciary, which is making sure when people give Merrill Lynch money, that money is there for their retirement or for whatever projects they need to get done. So I know what it takes to make sure that your money or the business's money is secure and taken care of. We want to make sure to protect the downside, and we also want to make people money the same way. So the way I look at it, I do this every day in my job, and I think I could apply it to the town and be able to make good decisions monetarily for the citizens of Lauderdale-by-the-Sea. Please vote for me.
Mr. Vincent.
8 years ago, we started and completed a capital improvement project that transformed the downtown and western areas of Commercial Boulevard to an amazing walking, dining, and destination that we can all be proud of. Our residents and visitors are happy to be here. Our hotels and restaurants are flourishing. We accomplished this without having to raise your taxes or borrow money by still maintaining the 3rd lowest millage. We continue to have the best public safety for our first responders, BSO, the VFD, and AMR. They are an enormous part of our community and great partners. I've worked hard to form relationships and have connected with residents and business owners in our town, and thank you for your trust for that. You've heard tonight the differences between me and my opponent. From him you hear too much I and me. You've heard many times in life, there's no I in team. Truth is nothing happens up here. The truth is that nothing happens up here alone. I will continue to work with staff and other commission members and you as a team to keep LBTS the very best place to live. I've received overwhelming support and encouragement from the voters of our town, and I ask you to reach out to me should you have any questions. I'm asking for your vote March 13th to be your next mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you. We're fortunate to have 2 good candidates running for mayor, but I believe I'm the stronger candidate. I've accomplished a lot on the commission. I started the annual Veterans Day ceremony to honor our veterans for their service to our country. I secured federal grants to make long-awaited improvements on Elmar Drive and to rebuild our beach. Chris's votes against putting the sand on the beach to help us recover from the hurricane should disqualify him from being mayor. You can't be the mayor of a beachfront community if you don't support the beach and if you don't understand the role that the beach plays in supporting our local economy and our quality of life. And his refusal to address any improvements at the Holiday Inn site are inexcusable. I answer every email and telephone call I receive from town residents because I care about your concerns. I'm retired now, so I can devote my full time to being your mayor. I genuinely care about Lauderdale-by-the-Sea and its residents. A vote for me is a vote for a better future for the town. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that now concludes the candidate forum for this evening. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I have 3 quick announcements to make. Number 1, to let you know, since the last time we were all gathered here 2 years ago, if you need to do a voter registration change, you can now do it online directly with the supervisor of elections. No more paperwork is required. I want you to also know that as of today, we estimate there's somewhere between 12 and 14 different issues that you will see on your ballot in November. The League of Women Voters does a presentation on all the amendments, whether they are citizen, state legislature, or the Constitutional Revision Commission, or the Broward Revision Commission. Remember too, so if you want that, feel free to invite us back. We'll have somebody do that presentation for you sometime from July on. And also remember that the ballots that you see are in 3 languages, so you're going to get a small book. And last but not least is we strongly urge you to do an absentee ballot because of the above issue. Thank you, everybody.